morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are and when you're listening. Light After Trauma listeners, this is David Scolari, Alyssa's husband, editor of the podcast, and all-around nice guy. Alyssa forgot to record a intro for part 2 of our interview about guilt and shame with Rebecca, so I am just filling in here as we are rushing about, as we are about to go on vacation, and we want to get these episodes out to you before we go. So this is part 2 of the Rebecca interview. So enjoy and have a great rest of the week.
Wow. That is a very powerful. Workaholics, even potentially like perfectionists, because when we are stuck in the perfectionism, which I used to be all the time, you have no fun. Mm-hmm. Zero fun is to be had when you are living in a world where everything has to be perfect.
Right. And Brene Brown says, behind every perfectionist, there are shame messages.
Brene Brown.
Yep. And it's interesting because I never really put that together until I learned more about shame, that people will self-punish by limiting their own pleasure. And then society will punish shame. It's used as a disciplinary action. Like if the action is taboo, right? Like if you do that, you'll be kicked out of the tribe. Shame is used as like a disciplinary action in a lot of like homes, a lot of like societies, a lot of sports.
Yeah.
If you're not good enough, you're kicked out. It's used as like a motivator, although ill-equipped motivator, and also as like a disciplinary action.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. How much our society uses shame as a way to try to morph people into what we want them to be.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's exactly right. It's used as like a disciplinary, if you don't meet this criteria, if you don't do things this way, then you're cut out of the tribe. That fear of abandonment, that fear of rejection kicks in. If I'm not this way and I don't feel this way, so I have to pretend to be this way, then you end up feeling like something's wrong because you don't ally with that. It's interesting. There's an African American tribe, when a member of the tribe does something wrong, they put the person in the middle of this circle of all the tribe members, and they all go around and tell that person something that they did right.
Oh, that's the opposite of shame.
Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so interesting.
Wow. How incredibly healing is that? Especially when you look at, right, when we talk about how do we treat guilt and shame, right? How do we treat these horrible, horrible emotions and have them not be so overwhelming to a person and take over the person's world? A lot of it is about like rewiring the brain and using cognitive behavioral therapy methods, which is kind of like, let's take your thoughts and let's recreate the narrative. Mm-hmm. Well, you have a whole tribe of people doing that, mm-hmm. which makes it so much easier to rewire the brain.
Right. And I thought that is so powerful. Even thinking about how it really made me stop and think like how I react to my own kids when they do something, like wrong, or they do something or say something that's hurtful. And it's so easy to do what we've been taught, and, send a message of shame and I thought to really be able to bring out like something they have done right, or how their feelings are right, how they express them might not be land the way they want it to land, but to be able to show them that their feelings are valid and what they did was right, just how they did it could be better. I thought that was really interesting because you have a whole tribe of people who are like validating that person so that they don't get the shame message, and they're able to forgive themselves, and they know that they have forgiveness from their tribe, right? It's the opposite.
I love that. That's the complete opposite of what we do in this world, which is, God forbid you make a mistake. And now it's not even that you're shamed. It's you're canceled. You as a human being, your existence on this earth, you are canceled.
Yep. You're canceled. Right. So one of the other things I learned about shame, because it starts so young, is it is such a deep rooted central nervous system reaction. Like it goes so deep.
Wired in the brain and
yes,
and the nervous system.
So a lot of it is helping them feel it. There's this one part of treatment that talks about paying attention to people's posture when you're talking about their shame and helping them correct their posture as they tell you their story, because really being aware of where you feel the shame in your body is so important to treating shame, because you can rewire the brain. You can use CBT, but you have to use something that is more mind-body connected along with the CBT, or you will never really fully treat the shame. So one of the things that I thought was really powerful was paying attention to people's posture as they tell you their story, as you work through their shame, and helping them correct their posture as they tell you the story. And I thought that was really interesting.
Helping them, like correcting their posture in the moment. Yeah, which I could see how that would be so powerful. I mean, I know just sitting in my office when people tell their story, you do watch their posture, and what they do is they kind of curl into the fetal position. Or what I would do is I would take my old therapist had a blanket in her office, and I would take the blanket and I would cover myself up to my shoulders, like from the shoulders down in the blanket, and like kind of curled in the fetal position. And yeah, I mean, I never did this in therapy, but I can think of how powerful it would be to correct that, to take the blanket off, to sit up with my shoulders back.
Yes. And talk about your shame messages. So that's a lot of like CBT working on with Paris, and I can never say that like word, isn't that like
I can't say it either. What the hell is it? Oh, the parasympathetic nervous system.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Never like yes, thank you. I knew if I tried to say it, I would have totally loved that up, parasympathetic nervous system. So I feel like those two working in conjunction, when you can help people correct their posture, you would have to do that slowly. Like you'd have to say, what would it feel like to take the blanket off? Those things are really, I think, useful tools in treating shame. And then because we really feel shame more than we like talk about it, we feel it, right?
Yes.
And then Tara Brach did a lot of work in treating shame as well. So her message really is, what is happening inside me now? And can I let this be? When you're talking through shame messages, like to stop and say, what is happening inside your body right now? And can you let this be? It reminds me of exposure therapy when you're doing and anxiety only goes up. People feel like their anxiety is going to go just like it's just never going to stop and their head's going to pop off their body. Like that's what it feels like, but that obviously doesn't happen. So your anxiety only goes up to a certain point, and then it
tapers off.
It starts to come down. And once you realize anxiety does have a ceiling, then it feels more manageable. You can manage that anxiety. And it reminds me of this kind of work, like stopping people as they're talking through shame and helping, take their blanket off and sit up straight and help them feel the shame. What is happening in your body right now? And can you let that be? Helps, I think, the same thing. Realize that what's happening in your body is not boundless.
Yes, it's not going to kill you. It might feel like it's going to kill you, but it's not.
So can you let it be, and can we release it? Like that is, I feel like, really, really powerful.
Yes, that coupled with being able to do that with a person who is safe, a therapist who is safe, who is letting you or making space for you to feel that and is not adding to it. So that therapist's calming tone and the lack of shame and the lack of guilt inducing and the lack of judgment on the part of the therapist is so healing.
So healing. And then, of course, hopefully people who do this kind of work with their therapist have an authentic attachment to that person. So
yes,
that is what becomes healing, is that you can trust another human with these stories who's going to help you move through and release these shame messages and help you be more self-compassionate and help you learn how, like, inner attunement, help you balance that. Like, that's really so healing, right? Because your attachment, you learn to heal your attachments that way. You learn to how what a secure attachment feels like. You learn to know what you can expect from that. And then you learn how to process these shame messages and rewire your brain, process and replace those shame messages. You learn to trust those new messages that are healthier, and let go of the old messages, all through that healthy attachment and release of shame in your body. There's a lot of therapeutic yoga poses that help release some of the shame.
Yes. There is this, it's free for the listeners out there. It's Yoga with Adrienne. She has these different types of yoga that are specifically for opening up the different parts of your body. And I did this one heart opener yoga. Oh, my Lanta. What came out of me, the feelings that just released. So do not, if anybody is rolling your eyes out there at the idea of yoga to help release guilt and shame, or as a treatment as part of your treatment in general, don't roll your eyes no more, because go Google Yoga with Adrienne and your life will be forever changed.
And actually, one of the people in our practice is a certified yoga therapist. So Deanne Mishler is a certified yoga therapist, and she also does workshops in yoga therapy. So
that's incredible.
You can find her on our
rebelliouswellnesscounseling.com, baby.
So she also sees people individually for that as well. But I think that along with that, there are some meditations that therapists can use or can give, and that so effective to do that with a therapist that you have a secure attachment to. And then you can do the meditations on your own, but to do that with somebody to mirror that person and be with them in that shame is the way it's truly healed and allows people to let go of those messages and take on more appropriate, healthier messages.
Yeah, I think it's very important that you've pointed out the necessity of having a healthy attachment with the therapist, because I think, and I've heard the story many times before, that there are people who will go into see a therapist and will release all of it in the first session and just kind of spout off, this is what happened, this is where I'm at. And they kind of share all of their trauma, all of their feelings, and then they leave and they never come back. And that is likely because it's not healing to be doing that with somebody that you have not cultivated an attachment with, that you haven't cultivated a safe relationship with. So it's very important to make sure that you are doing this work with a therapist who is safe, because if not, you run the risk of re-traumatizing yourself.
Right, exactly. There's a quote by Dan Siegel.
I love Dan Siegel.
I know. It's in the Neural Integration in the Treatment of Shame. And it says, it's important to get them beneath thinking with words, thinking. And instead we want them to become present with their own internal experience beyond, beneath, and before words. And I love that quote because it reminds me always, like, people are connected to content. That's what I feel like. And I'm guilty of that too. Even, as I say all the time, every good therapist has a good therapist. And, even when I am talking, like I want to get all my content out. But what we know, especially in the treatment of shame, is that content isn't important. It especially like in the treatment of attachments, when we're trying marriage therapy, like everybody wants to talk about their content, but what's important is the feeling. What's important is what happens in your body, like before the words. And that's like what I think that's really hard to do by yourself. Like, I think there's a ton of books and meditations out there that people can find, but I think that's really hard to do on your own. I think it's so much easier to find a therapist that you trust, that you can build a secure attachment with. And most time people don't come in, like you said, into our office and say, I have shame. It's that you have anxiety or you feel depressed and then it's shame comes after you've built that attachment, that you can sort of start to talk about those messages, those unwanted intrusive messages that are shame messages, and be able to identify them, talk about the root of them, and release that.
Exactly. And it's so much more about the shame and the guilt than it is about the content. Not that your story isn't important, not that what happened to you isn't important, but like you said, it's very easy. And I'm guilty of this too. I will sit down with my therapist and I will spend an hour talking about all the things that happened, and not about what's happening in my body. And in a way, that itself can be a form of dissociation or a way to maintain a level of disconnectedness from your body to avoid any painful emotions. So
to avoid painful emotions. That's exactly right. And I think that, one of the treatments is to develop inner attunement. And that's what you're talking about, like to attach our content to what we're feeling, because there's a lot of content that makes us feel the same way. And if we can really get to the root of why we feel that way, it doesn't matter. The content doesn't matter. We stop that shame message. So we stop that high standard. We start taking some of our vacation days to self-care. And that is a sign that you're healing from shame, that you start to take a sick day, a mental health day, a vacation day.
Set some boundaries, right?
Boundaries. Recognize if you're being self-critical and like correct that, write your path. I think that's all, it helps us be more authentic and genuine. And if you're authentic and genuine, then you have very few shame messages. So because you kind of you're able to deal with them in the moment. You're able to reject what doesn't sit right. You're able to so it is interesting. It's something that I also think, just for the listeners, it's a work in progress. It's not a work that's done. It's not I feel anxious, fix my anxiety. It's a work in progress. Like, I think what you learn is a practice that helps you stay from attaching to shame messages. So it's a constant kind of work in progress. Like, I don't think that it's fix my shame and I'm all good now. It's that you learn tools and practices that when you feel that in your body, you're able to inner attune. You're able to figure out where that's coming from and either rewrite that or right your ship, or you're able to process that and reattune. So I think it's a work in progress. You're always doing it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, this was a really difficult topic to tackle, hence needing the 2-part episode, because it's just, guilt and shame are just such complex emotions. But I could think of nobody better equipped to have this discussion with than you.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show and for sharing. For the listeners out there, obviously, I know you love Rebecca. Rebecca's episodes get like the most downloads. So Rebecca is much loved on this podcast, and fear not, because we have some really great things coming for you in the future. So stay tuned for that. And yes, thank you to the listeners for tuning in. And thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I love to talk about all of these things with you. It's always enlightening. So
it's the best.